So I would like to call to the floor our next speaker, Mr. Eric Chipeta, who is a program analyst for energy and environment working in the UNDP Zambia office. And he will be presenting on his experiences with specifically targeting the empowerment of women and the improvement of rural livelihoods through the strengthening of climate resilience of the agriculture value chain. So it would be great to hear a different country perspective with Zambia's experience. So Mr. Chipeta, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible enough and that I will be able to engage effectively with all of us that are participating. Introduction already made, and the experiences that we're sharing are based on a Green Climate Fund funded project that is named according to what's on the screen. Outline of the presentation, as indicated over there. The project overview, the name of the project is Strengthening Climate Resilience of Agricultural Livelihoods in Agroecological Zones 1 and 2 in Zambia. Those are the areas that have the least rainfall in the country, just to demystify that. Result areas for the project is that there is a planned increased resilience of most vulnerable people and communities, and also contributing to the health and well-being, food and water security. It's a 7-year project, and total budget is $32 million from Green Climate Fund. So I was just articulating that we are in the 16 districts in Zambia, in the drier regions of the country. Next. You can continue clicking until the graphics come out. So we had a very detailed consultative process. Among other things that happened during that period was that we had the value chain analysis that was supported by the NAP program. I see Julie is on the call. She played the pivotal role in supporting that particular aspect of the documentation that was required by GCF. Next. So the project overview, main objective of the project is to enhance the lives and livelihoods of smallholder farmers in those dry regions of Zambia that have been adversely affected by increasing climate change risks. And the key component is strengthening and diversifying climate resilient agri-based value chains that are economically viable for small-scale farmers. Next. So the project focus is looking at interventions across the entire value chain. You can continue clicking. There are a few graphics that need to come. So from the planning part, where we get weather information, that informs the planning in terms of what kind of crops the farmers are supposed to select, in terms of their climate resilience and marketability. And then there is a point where we have to deal with inputs in terms of seeds, water, soil test kits, and the rest of that. And then the next point is production, where we have resilient agricultural practices and also crops, including alternative livelihoods that include goat rearing and things like that. And then the last part of the chain is processing, storage, and transportation, and links to viable markets. The premise really is on the principles and the 3 strands of sustainable development, where you have economic viability, which is the key element that addresses the question of the value chains. And you're talking about environmental sustainability, and you're also talking about social acceptance. We can go to the next. So there are 3 outputs that are on this particular project. The first part of the design looks at smallholder farmers are able to plan for and manage climate risk to support resilient production. So in here, basically what's been happening is the strengthening of the weather observation network to be able to provide downscaled information that farmers use to plan for an agricultural season. And then this information is disseminated in different major languages, local languages in the country. And the farmers then take decisions on which seeds to buy and whether it requires avoidance of planting low-lying areas, they have to do that, and what kind of agricultural practices they are supposed to use. Can we go to the next slide? The next output looks at production, basically promotion of solar-powered irrigation schemes, water storage, water capture, and things like that. And there is also provision of resilient seeds, which are largely legumes. And then there is also introduction of new resilient agricultural production practices to strengthen production and diversify crops in the context of climate variability and climate change. We can go to the next one. This is a continuation of output number 2 that talks about beekeeping activities, goat rearing and fish farming, some of the activities, and the farmer field school model is used for experiential learning to just help the farmers absorb new knowledge and technology. Next slide, please. So in the third output, that's where we find issues to do with market access. And the rationale is that if the markets are not functioning, then everything else is going to collapse. So this one looks at strengthening processing of resilient products. It looks at strengthening storage, aggregation, transportation of these products, and using models that have been tested by WFP over a long period of time. And for this particular output, WFP is playing a key role using the experiences that they've had with market aggregators. And so they rolled out trainings for market aggregators, setting up infrastructure that includes hard infrastructure such as storage facilities, and also soft infrastructure such as toil cycles and things like that to help, especially the women folk with the drudgery of transportation. We can go to the next one. Next, please. Okay, we can proceed and go to the next one. Okay, so that's the overall budget and how it's segmented into outputs. Next. Okay, so the results of the analysis, just to indicate that this analysis was done in 2016, and the Royal Tropical Institute was engaged by UNDP NAPAD program as an input to the SCALA project design process. And that particular study was titled, the title that is below there, Analyzing Gender-Sensitive Agricultural Value Chains in Zambia, Identifying Climate Resilient Opportunities and Approaches. Next. So the criteria for selection of the value chains was such that the following were considered: the number of smallholders involved nationally in that particular chain, the relevance of the crop to household income generation, the relevance of the crop to enhancing household food security, market potential and competitiveness, the resilience of the crop to climate change, impact of the crop on the environment, and the gender roles. Next. So these are the crops that were subjected to the analysis. Next. The findings were that all the 4 crops that were indicated on the previous slide scored highly for climate change resilience and the issues that surround women participation in the value chain. Cowpeas and cassava particularly scored high for their drought resilience, while rice and soybean, though more susceptible to climate impacts, particularly rainfall variability, are still considered more resilient than more common crops such as maize. The next finding was that women play key roles in all the 4 value chains, with rice and cowpeas in particular considered female crops in quotes due to the large role women play in their production. Both cassava and soybeans also have significant participation from women, mostly in production, with cassava also seeing participation from women in processes at the processing stage. Next. We continue with the findings, and across all the value chains, it was noted that there was limited usage of inputs, both fertilizer and quality seeds, which limits agricultural productivity. It was also noted that extension services should include market information and training, including on storage and processing techniques, in addition to training on agricultural production practices. It was also noted that the cost of transporting crops to markets is a barrier for all four value chains, for which interventions could include not only improved hard infrastructure, but also the development of aggregation and collection points to provide economies of scale in transportation. Processing capacity is limited, in particular the small and medium enterprises. Entrepreneurs engaged in processing lack access to finance, and the policy context is important, in particular where policies such as subsidies can discourage diversification. Next. We continue with the results. The largest contributors to women disempowerment, unfortunately, in Zambia are workload, where a woman who works more than 10.5 hours per day, it's considered disempowerment, in that they are also restricted in terms of access to credit and decisions on finance. For example, in the rice value chain, women, while they are the primary producers of rice, men take the rice to the market and control the financial resources. And that was noted as a bottleneck that was against the women folk. Next. Conclusions, extension services and improved quality seed. These are some of the things that needed to be done after looking at the whole chain and the needs that came out of the analysis. Processing and transport infrastructure is also a need that needed to be addressed. To national campaigns to enhance demand for crops such as cassava, that needs to be done. Interventions to focus specifically on policy environment for different crops. So these are some of the conclusions that are coming out. And then just to indicate that the benefits that we got from that analysis is that guided selection of value chains, it guided the selection of value chains that were climate resilient, as well as offered economic opportunities. Number two, it helped narrow down value chains for consideration in the economic analysis, and only the crops that produced positive values were considered. So that was very, very useful. It helped identify key actions based on issues that were articulated in the analysis. And so the project incorporated the findings and or used principles of value chain analysis to select value chains that passed the test of environmental sustainability and the elements of the economics. We can go to the next one. I think that was about the end. I thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.